Maybe you're in a different season of life. Maybe you're at the stage of life where it's like a number in the bank account. If we could just get to that number, if we could just have this amount in the bank account, then we could retire. Then we could buy the house. Then we could go live where we want to live. Every single one of us, we have something at the heart of ourselves that we treasure, that we ascribe ultimate value to. And the problem with that is that every treasure in our lives, other than the person of Jesus Christ, demands that we die in order to purchase it. Think about it. Every treasure, other than the person of Christ, demands that you die in order to get it. The message is, run after me, sacrifice everything to get me, do whatever you have to do, work as hard as you have to work to attain me and to get me, and then you will have security and you will have beauty. But the beauty of the gospel message is that Jesus is the only treasure who actually dies in order to purchase us. He is the only treasure that when we put him at the center of our lives, when we make him the highest value of our lives, he actually dies in order to purchase us. Our worth and our value actually doesn't come from something external. It comes from what he calls us to be, what he says we are, and our identity in him. That's where we find ultimate value. That's where we find ultimate purpose and ultimate worth. What's amazing about Jesus' life is that Jesus actually faced the same temptation that we face. When it comes to worship, Jesus faced the temptation to put something other than God in that ultimate, other than his heavenly Father, in that ultimate place of value and worth in his life. He faced the temptation to worship something else. You find it early in Jesus' life. If you take Matthew 15, where we were just a moment ago, where Jesus makes that indictment against the people of his day. If you wind the clock back to Matthew chapter 4, Jesus, before he'd ever, performed any miracle, before he'd ever healed anyone or preached any sermons, Jesus in Matthew 4, before he begins his ministry, he goes out into the wilderness and he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights to draw closer to God. And during that period of time, Satan comes to him and offers him 3 temptations. Some of you remember this. Some of you have read through this. And what's amazing about these 3 temptations that Jesus undergoes from the devil is that they are kind of the big 3. They're the big 3 that every single human being faces. They're common to all of us. And they're also the big 3 that Israel faced when they were wandering in the wilderness. And so we're going to look today at the third of those 3 temptations, because believe it or not, the third temptation Jesus faced had to do with worship. It's that big a deal. It's the same temptation all of us face. One of the big 3 has to do with worship. So let's look at this together. This is the third temptation Jesus faces in Matthew 4. It says, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. So he offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world, all their splendor, power, authority, political, ability and power and kingly, majesty. If you bow down and worship me, I'll give it all to you. Now, I don't know about you. The first time I ever remember reading this, I remember the thought I had was, really? Is that a temptation for Jesus to worship the devil? I mean, think about it, like Son of God, Messiah. Would that really be a temptation for Jesus to worship the devil? I mean, that would not look good on a resume, would it? Son of God, but yeah, I worship the devil. That's my thing. That wouldn't work, right? So I used to think, like, that's ridiculous. Why would Jesus even be tempted? But if you look a layer deeper at this, what you begin to realize is this temptation held out for Jesus everything that he would have treasured. Even as the Son of God, even as the Messiah, it had everything that he would have treasured. Think about it. In this moment, Satan is literally saying to Jesus, you know what, Jesus? I'm going to step out of your way. I'm not going to get in your way at all. He said, I will give you all the kingdoms of this earth, the limited dominion and power and authority that I have been given for this period of time. I'm going to lay it all down. I'll step out of the way. I'll let you do whatever you want. You can be in charge. And you know what? You don't even have to go through the cross. You don't even have to suffer and die and all that stuff. You can just have it now. And you can direct the world however you want. Think about what Jesus would have valued, what he would have treasured. I mean, you realize this would have been a perfect opportunity for Jesus, in charge of all the kingdoms of all the world, to make the world exactly the way it was supposed to be. You remember when Jesus teaches his disciples how to pray? Remember, he teaches them to pray, God, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth the way it is in heaven. Do you realize this was a chance for Jesus literally to make his kingdom, on earth come exactly the way that he wanted it to be on earth as it is in heaven. This was a chance for him to actually do that. In one move, Jesus could have ended all wars. There had been no more Ukraine and Russia, no more world wars, nothing. He could have ended all suffering. He could have eradicated all injustice, all poverty in the world, and he could have made it exactly how he wanted. There's only one catch. You've got to worship, Satan says, me. You've got to worship me in the highest place. You've got to ascribe ultimate value and ultimate worth to me in order to do that. And what Satan does is he comes along to you and me and he whispers the same thing in your ear and in my ear. He says the same thing to us every single day. Because Satan knows if he can just get you to put something other than God in the highest value of your life, ascribe worthship to something other than God, and to value that above all else, to make that something else the treasure that you're seeking after, he's already won. He's already got you. Because you'll never live out and fulfill God's perfect plan for your life. You'll never live into what he's set aside and he's designed for you to do. Ephesians 2:10, you're God's workmanship designed, prepared in advance to do good works that he's advanced for you to do. Without God at the center of your life as the highest value, you'll never do those things. And Jesus wouldn't have either. Philippians 2 tells us that God already had a plan. It says that Jesus, the plan was for him to come to this earth, for him to not have political and kingly power during his time, but to sacrifice his life, to give up his life on the cross in a sacrificial death for our sins, and to raise to new life, that one day, it says, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. He will be established as the highest authority over everything in heaven and on earth, and where else? Under the earth. Satan was going to have to bow down eventually anyway. But the temptation was, worship me now, you can have it all now. You don't even have to have the cross. You can just have it. Jesus doesn't take the bait. I love this, verse 10. Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. That's how Jesus responds. Now, what's beautiful about this is Jesus, the way he rebuffs Satan in this temptation is he quotes scripture. What he's quoting there, worship the Lord your God and serve him only, that is Deuteronomy 6, verse 13. Now, why that's so significant is because Deuteronomy 6 is a chapter of the Bible. It was a central passage for the people of Israel, and it's all about worship. It begins with a holy prayer called the Shema that the Israelites would have said every single day. It begins, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then it speaks what Jesus called the greatest of all the commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And then in verse 13 it says, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. That whole chapter in the Bible is all about how to love God as the highest value of your life, how to worship him only. And Jesus quotes that passage to Satan. He says, this is what I'm called to do. The only way I'm going to get where I'm called to do is to go with God's plan, is to put him in the highest place and let him lead me in my life. And that's the only way it works for us too. Now, I know what you're thinking. Right now what you're thinking is, well, yeah, that's great, but he was Jesus, right? That's great that Jesus was able to do that, but he's Jesus. I'm me. So how do we move into this place in our lives? How do we begin to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength? How do we begin to worship him only as the highest value of our lives? I want to share with you something. This was written by a guy named Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard of Clairvaux was a French abbot in the 12th century. And he wrote about, it's called A Treatise on Love, if you're interested in looking it up online or going a layer deeper with this. A Treatise on Love, he talked about these 4 moves that we make as we begin to grow. For all of us kind of start at the same point, and as we begin to grow, and we begin to grow in worship, and we begin to love God, how these 4 kind of stages we move through until we get to the point where we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and worship him alone. And so I'm going to give you the first 3 of these 4 because I've just found them to be so meaningful and helpful in my life personally. It's been there's a reason that we're still talking about that all these years later. I'm only going to give you the first 3 because what Bernard of Clairvaux says is actually the 4th of these steps, the 4th of these kind of stages we move through, we only will accomplish in heaven. So the fourth one of these, we're only going to be able to love God and worship God to this degree once we're in heaven. And by the way, do you guys know what we're going to be doing in heaven? Revelation 6 says that we're going to be gathered around the throne of God in heaven with all the saints and all the angels. We're going to be joining in singing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." We're going to be worshiping. That's what all of eternity is building up for. This is just a practice run for that. That's where it's all headed. And Bernard of Clairvaux says this fourth stage, we're only going to experience that once we get to heaven. So I'm only going to give you the first three of the treatise of love, the first three that he talks about, because I'm pretty sure that we're all still alive here in this room. Is that true, or is everybody still alive? Online, I'm guessing all of you're still alive. So we'll just talk about the first three. The fourth one's only happens when we get to heaven. So here's the first one. The base point, where everybody starts, is I'll love me for me. All of us, this is where we begin. I'll love me for me. We're interested in God, but it's really about me loving me. It's a selfish love. An illustration of this kind of love, the way I've heard it described is, it's kind of like how a consumer loves a brand. Think about it that way. You know, people talk about like, man, I love Starbucks. Man, I love, pumpkin spice latte here in a few weeks. I love Starbucks. But, you understand when someone says that, when they say I love Starbucks, they're not saying I sacrificially love Starbucks. Starbucks is the highest value of my life. That's not what they're saying. They're saying I love me drinking some Starbucks, right? That's what they're really saying. I love me for me. Starbucks just helps me love me a little bit better. People say, oh, I love Apple. I love Apple products, right? They're not saying I really sacrificially love Apple. They're just saying, I love me using the new iPhone. That's what they're really saying. That's I love me for me. But what happens is eventually at some point we begin to be able to love God, and we begin to actually have a love for the other and an awareness of the other. So we eventually move into this place where I'll love God for me. So it is actually a love of the other, but it still has a selfish motive. It's not a purely selfish love, but it has a selfish motive. It's I'll love God, I'll worship him, but I'll love him for me. It's I'll worship him with my lips, but my heart is going to be still far from him. Maybe a good way to understand this is if you think about most of the prayers that we pray. For most of us, our prayers are, I love God for me. We begin with prayer and we just, God, here's my request. God, will you help me with this? Will you help me with that? I've got this problem. I've got that problem. Will you answer this prayer? A lot of times we skip right over worship, don't we? And our prayer life is just, here's what I need you to do for me, guys. I'll love God, but I'll love him for me. An illustration of this is if you've ever seen an infant with his mother. You think of like a newborn baby with their mother. Infants, they love their mother. They love their mother. And later on in life, certainly they will love their mother as well. But when they're an infant, they don't really love their mother for any other reason that their mother is providing for every single need of their life, right? It's like literally if that mother doesn't provide every need that they have, that child is going to die. So infants love their mother. They have a bond and a connection with their mother. But it's, I'll love my mother for me. And that's where so much of us are. This kind of love, I'll love God for me, hasn't yet understood the gospel. Hasn't yet gone through the crucible of grasping the gospel. It's still an attempt to say, okay, I'll love God, but it's so I can get something from him, so I can earn something from him, so he'll answer some prayers. I'll try to be good, I'll try to love him, I'll try to worship him so that he'll bless me, keep me out of hell, all that kind of stuff. And you haven't fully understood the gospel yet. Bernard of Clairvaux says at some point in life, the highest really that we get to in this life is we get to this point where we can say, I love God for God. I love God for God. He is the highest value, the highest worth of my life. Whether I get anything out of it or not. This is how I love my mom today as an adult. I love my mom for who she is, not just for what she does for me. I'll love God for God. You see expression after expression of this in the Bible, by the way. All the stories of the Old Testament. You know the book of Daniel? Some of you remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You remember that story, some of you? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're about to be thrown into a fiery furnace and be burned alive because they won't bow down and worship this gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Remember what they say to him? They say, King Nebuchadnezzar, we want you to know that God is able to save us even if you throw us in the fiery furnace. But then what do they say? But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, O king, we will not bow down and we will not worship your golden statue. That's I'll love God for God. Job, arguably the oldest book in the entire Bible. Job was a righteous man, and he loses everything. By the first 2 chapters of Job, his health is gone, his children are taken from him, his entire wealth, all his livelihood, it all is stripped away from him. It all comes crashing to the ground. And Job 2, there's this one of the most beautiful expressions of true worship. It says Job fell down on the ground in worship when he'd lost everything. And in that famous line, he says, "You give and you take away, yet I will still choose to bless your name." That's I'll love God for God. He's saying, you get to choose, God. You bring blessings into my life or you take them away. It doesn't matter. I'll still love you for you. I'm still going to choose to bless you whether you do it or don't do it for me. I'll love God for God. We can only worship like that when we've understood the gospel. We understand that Jesus is the only treasure, that when we value him, he actually dies in order to purchase us. And that there's nothing to lose, nothing to gain, nothing to prove. When we have him, we have everything. And it doesn't matter what else happens.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope it made an impact on your life somehow. And if it did, don't forget to like or subscribe or share it on social media with your friends as well. We always love seeing you. And remember that you can join us live every single Sunday. So hope to see you there.